Well, great. If I could ask the water panelists to come up and take a seat, and because of who we are, and because there are so many of us with so much knowledge, I cannot let this opportunity pass. The original thinking for this water quality panel was to have two water treatment plants, the Upper Blackstone and the Narragansett Bay Commission, and then have two environmentalists discuss the issue of nutrients and how much is too much and who should pay. Unfortunately, the invites had gone out, and the next day the U.S. Circuit Court issued its decision. So in the words of one of our panelists, the sides have lawyered up, and therefore they cannot talk to each other. Unfortunately, this has been the situation in the Blackstone since I got here in 1987, 20 years ago. You know, the bad blood between Worcester and the regulation EPA as 20 years ago, the resistance of Worcester to say why should we clean up the river when it's so polluted downstream, it's not going to make improvements, that has played itself out in the 1998 permit, which got appealed for a few years and is called the 2001 consent decree. That is basically the plan, the permit that is governing the treatment plant today. They were given 15 years to expand and do a lot better job, so they have done that. That permit had a new condition for having to deal with nutrients that had not been required in the permits up to then. So, this is changing for all of us. And it is unfortunate, in my opinion, when you have to hire lawyers. And I kind of think in Blackstone Valley, we like to talk to each other. So I'm hopeful that this too shall pass. This is just one element of a campaign for a fishable, swimmable Blackstone River. This is the goal that we as a nation set in 1972 under President Nixon. All of our rivers shall be fishable and swimmable. Now, if you look into the law, I think those words don't exist in the actual ingredient, fishable, swimmable. They exist in explaining what a Class B water is. We don't expect our rivers to be drinkable. That would be Class A. Many cities have to treat river water so they can drink that. That's not what the goal was set for the Blackstone. We have set more that the fish that should be there should be able to live there. It's the way I interpret it broadly. Aquatic life should not be impaired by the quality of the water. So, we quickly get into what are the impacts and nutrients and how much is too much. Up to now, we've been living with narrative standards, leaving it to the best professional judgment of regulators to say how much is too much. And that has been good. EPA now, you need to quantify that and to put a number so that you can write a permit that is defensible in court. The science is getting a lot better. We know more and more about how much is too much. We can measure these things. The science, I'm comfortable that everyone can agree on the science and investing in the model to predict what conditions might be at extreme droughts, 7Q10 in the middle of the summer with how much flow. It's very complex. The science is there though. The modeling is going on. We're understanding that there's not enough water to dilute the pollutants coming out of a major city such as Worcester. So unfortunately, due to geography, Worcester has to treat for a big load in a small stream. If you think of all the major cities, they're usually on a big water body. So that's part of the problem. Worcester also has to treat for both phosphorus and nitrogen. Big treatment plants don't often have to do that. And then the major complaint of Worcester is where's the money? That when the law was passed, there was lots of monies that federal money that went to pay for new treatment plants. That money is not available at the same extent. So, but it is clear that the goal of fishable, swimmable is valid. The city doesn't push back on that. They recognize it's a noble goal. They're just saying, help give us money or time or relief. The law is clear though. The permit has to go out. The permit should go out every 5 years. The permits require that if we're not meeting standards, we should do a TMDL, and you'll hear more about what the state has to do and all the science required to do a good job of that. and then it has to be implemented, and then it has to be abided by. So, phosphorus is too much. The Charles River TMDL has been done. The science is clear there. How much? $10,000 per impervious acre to bring parking lots up to standards. That's what we're looking at. That's what's going to happen. That's what will be required when the next stormwater regulation comes out. In Rhode Island already for new development, you've got to build it this way. Massachusetts, we're getting there. But the real challenge is retrofitting existing sources of phosphorus. So that's going to be my talk is on phosphorus load. But I did just want to lay out, this is such a critical time for people to work together on the river. And because some of us can't work together on permits because we're lawyered up and we can't talk to each other, that should not stop the others of us still working together on things that we can do, which is the non-point source, which is a lot harder, but requiring those partnerships to work together. So the coalition's in an awkward position. We are, my professor said, I'm going to present the results of his paper. Don't take sides, Peter. Don't take sides. Just present the truth. It can speak for itself. Let the science talk. The problem is the science needs to be interpreted. There's a lot of good science out there, but the best models are based on assumptions and what they're good for. So it's really incumbent on us all to understand more about what we do on the land affects the water, and there are things we can do about it. So thank you for indulging me in brief off-the-cuff remarks on a very tendentious topic. But we all need to get educated and participate and acknowledge that there are other sides, but that we can't win the battle and lose the war. I think that we have won the record, the court has upheld EPA. Now it has to be negotiated. Now it's got to be implemented. It's got to be designed and built. And then that's just one small part. The other big part, of course, is non-point source. So we're on schedule now. And what is our? Yeah. All right. Now the original thought that this conference had been different things. Talking heads for 8 minutes on each subject. This year we've gone with panels of 3 and trying to engage in a little bit back and forth, and also a little bit back and forth from the audience as well. So I think there's time built into that. But today the panel, why don't you introduce yourself?
Tom, you vote the Narragansett Bay Commission.
And I'm Steve Pietro, Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management. Can everybody hear me back there? I tend to mumble.
And you each have a 5-10 minute presentation on your program. Do you want to say the general discussion? Should we go into now a discussion, or how do you want to handle it?
I think maybe we should probably make our presentations, and then it'll give the audience some information, and they can maybe feed off of that.
Okay.
Plan.
Sounds like a good plan. All right. Phosphorus loading looks like it's up first. Yeah.
I'm going from
there you go. All right, so thanks to State Line Auto in Attleboro, the Blackstone River Coalition received a significant chunk of money to do good things in the Blackstone because they were not doing what they should have. Stormwater, we helped someone who, a lawyer who got to find them, and it's a project, supplemental environmental project. It's going to help develop rain gardens. It's helped my board encourage me to engage UMass Amherst to work with the scientific model, the best science that can be done, courtesy of U.S. Geological Service, developing a model on flow, that then Camp Dresser and McKee and UMass Amherst developed nested models to build on that basic model, because flow is so critical for water quality. So you use what's called an HSPF model, developed by USGS to do that. And then do all this detailed wet weather monitoring. Take all the 10 years of data, create a big database, crunch all those numbers, try to predict how the river reacts at different conditions. They have spent 6 years. There's a great group called the Data Team, Blackstone Data Team, an informal group of state agencies, scientists who know their stuff, come together to share information. For the last 3-4 years, Up until about a year and a half ago, that group met and batted back and argued and disagreed and showed the good discussion that scientists can have when they're dealing with complex issues. But since the court case has been appealed, state agencies who were writing permits have to withdraw from that. EPA could never be in that room because they knew they couldn't accept a model developed by a developer because you can't trust the developer, in essence, right? You can't trust the treatment plan because he's going to create the model to show what he wants to. Well, Upper Blackstone was funded, I don't know, $2 million and counting maybe. And an open, here's our data, here, ask questions. So there's been some give and take, but the model was never really good enough because it's so complex that they realized that phosphorus isn't the issue. And I'm going to be talking about, phosphorus is the issue. They're saying, no, well, that might be the issue, but it's too complex. They should be looking at not even dissolved oxygen, because that is what standards. You have to have at least 5 milligrams of oxygen in water. It is more the eutrophication, the plant growth. So how do you define too much plant growth? There are the standards, it's easy, noxious weeds. Check off that box. If you have to ascribe a number to it, how do you do that? So now the science is chasing, well, they really have to get at chlorophyll A, that is the best indicator to show too much plant growth, which shows too much oxygen variability, which then results in the worst case fish kills or poor quality habitat. So that's where the science is going. Meanwhile, the courts are already going here. They have to decide on a case that was set up 3 years ago, so they're not arguing the science. They don't argue the science. They argue the law. Is EPA well within its scientific discretion? Yes. So the law is upheld, they will do it. But now the reality is that they have to write a permit that the engineers can design for them. And unfortunately, the treatment plant's ability to use bugs to eat and treat phosphorus in the river. So they spend a lot of money to capture all that water. Providence is spending how much money to capture all that water and then send it to the treatment plant? They did that. They've brought it up to where it's okay. This is where different states come in. Well, would the occasional burp be allowable in California? Is it allowable in Texas? Each state is allowed to determine what is acceptable on different things. So now we have an instance where we have 2 states, legitimate argument over the fate of nitrogen, but it is phosphorus. So I should continue to maintain my focus on phosphorus load. So we invested in the model, but we only took its results to so far. We then hired a professor, Timothy Randier, an economist, but also a scientist, a GIS guy, to then use another model to begin to say where this phosphorus is coming from. So next slide, please. So this is the results. And it might not look like much. It looks like a blob map. But those reds, they go down to 30-meter pixels. And that shade of red describes which acre, which 30 square meters has the highest load of phosphorus. Now, where is that number coming from? So you'll notice the cluster around Worcester in the headwaters. And then, basically, it's also impervious areas. If you look at it, it's very similar to a map showing impervious areas. And that's really how the model assumes the phosphorus is driven. So, what Timothy did, or what Paula Reese did, was to run the model, and they know exactly how many pounds are coming out of all the treatment plants because of their vast collection. So basically they do a crude mass balance. They know how much phosphorus is in the river. They know milligrams per liter at the end. They know how much is coming in from treatment plants. They can then ascribe everything else to non-point source, legitimately. And and I would say there's 2 major classes of non-point. There is fresh and current, whatever is raining or whatever is picking. There is also the sediments in these rivers that at some points are a phosphorus sink because they take out the phosphorus. At other times they give it. So it drives the modelers crazy trying to predict this system that's a function of weather and soils and loading. But thanks to software and computers, you can begin to crunch these numbers. So these numbers were real numbers based on actual water testing. knowing how much treatment was, how many pounds of phosphorus was coming out of all the treatment plants at that same day, they can then ascribe how many pounds of phosphorus was coming throughout the watershed. And then they will work backwards based on the model that says slope and soils and land use, and then ascribe that phosphorus load to a land use. And that is usually how basic watershed modeling is done. You take from other studies how many pounds of phosphorus come from different sorts of land use. You then apply that in your watershed, and that comes up with a total mass balance at the end of so many pounds of phosphorus for you. And that's what a total maximum daily load would then have to work backwards. That's your budget. Well, that's how much you have going now. Then the scientists will say, how much phosphorus is too much? A diet. How much do we have to cut to get down to where the rivers will be clean enough so there won't be that much growth? And they will come up with a number, and then they will waste load allocation. They'll figure out how many pounds go to each different services. So that is a major bureaucratic nightmare to try to do that. But that is what the law would require to do. So this model I'm going to be presenting you the results of today is a crude cut at what one step of that model is. Where is the waste coming from? And then the regulators would have to say, okay, well, who can cut back, where are the cutbacks you can't. So this map, yes, go to the next slide. This is the only slide, I only have 12 slides, but this one is from the Upper Blackstone's model. This is key to their argument that in 2011, the whole pie was about 300,000 pounds of phosphorus in the river every year. From that, 25% is treatment plants. Here is Worcester's treatment plant, the phosphorus per load. It is the most significant load to the river. What this chart doesn't show is, this is in pounds per year. Water permits have to be based on the quality met at low flows in the winter. So this is where pounds per year doesn't work with permits, which have to be expressed in milligrams per liter. And again, another reason for arguing. But at times of low flow, this time of the year, depending on where you are in the river, if you're at Fisherville, 90% of the river is the effluent coming out of the treatment plant. So that's why permits have to be written for over the year. So a permit written for phosphorus loading should arguably look a little bit different than a free-flowing river. So that's, again, another challenge with permits on the Blackstone. But looking at the Blackstone as a mass balance equation for phosphorus, the vast majority, 3/4 of it, is non-point source. Is half of that historic sediments that get burped up again every year as that same phosphorus works its way down from impoundment to impoundment? Could be. How does phosphorus move in the system? It's usually, there's a lot of phosphorus in our natural background. There's a lot of phosphorus in nature. There's a lot of phosphorus load from a forest. We'll see that. But it usually stays. Phosphorus binds tightly to the soil particles. It gets on fine particles, erosion happens, especially with development. It moves downstream. It gets into a pond, and it is usually the limiting nutrient in fresh waters. If you think about it in a pond, plants, what do they need to grow, or algae? They got all the water they want, they got all the sun. The only thing to stop them growing crazy is phosphorus. In the salt water, it's usually nitrogen. So, this is non-point source. They're going to argue about this, try to get this down as low as we can, and we support EPA, because they have to go as low. They have to go as low. These guys really have to go as low. So we can't waste our time arguing with Upper Blackstone. Other people will do that, and we support EPA. We have to educate everyone to work on this regard. So, next slide. So now, that was their model results. Now we've taken the model and then made our assumptions based on phosphorus, based on other models, and I'll walk you through that. But first is the flow. So around here we have about 43 inches of rain in an impervious area. Almost all of that is going to result in runoff. Now, they make a slight distinction between commercial and residential. We don't need to go into necessities. Basically, what this is showing is, in the green is the amount of flow that's either in runoff or this gets into the groundwater, the blue. The red is what's called interflow. That's the upper part of the groundwater that does flow. So depending on the different land uses, forest, commercial, high-density residential, low-density residential, open undeveloped. Let's look at open undeveloped. Most of the 30 inches that gets into the ground, or some of it runs off, not much, very little runs off. Most of it gets soaked into the ground. So that's why we want open undeveloped to allow the rainwater to infiltrate. You'll see in commercial, both of these, they've split off the impervious areas to the rest of the areas. In a commercial, you subtract out the impervious. There's still a fair amount of runoff, but you do get some absorption. In a forest, this is your best, really. You get, well, it's similar to open undeveloped. Doesn't get as much rain probably because the canopy evaporates it, but you're getting that recharge, and this is what we want. This runoff, that just carries everything with it. All right, so that's the average flow in inches per year. Next slide, please. Now, the average total phosphorus load in pounds per year from those same categories. They vary from 0 in a point, I don't know what this would be, 0.1 maybe in a forest per acre, versus a pound comes off of a commercial. And most of it is in the surface runoff. Not much gets down into the groundwater. So the phosphorus is being carried off mostly in the runoff. Here, 2 pounds of phosphorus every year is coming off of a residential impervious, because they're assuming there's more phosphorus load in a residential setting than in a commercial, closely. So you can argue with the assumptions, but this is just a way to do a crude mass balance. Again, not much chance to get the infiltration, all the runoff. If you can get 1.5 pounds off of high-density residential, there's a lot of phosphorus. So those are the goals, or where the load's coming from. Next, please. All right, this is that same thing put into charts. There have been different studies. Have we lost? Unfortunately, I've lost the one. So this is Mass DEP's prediction of how much pounds of phosphorus from each type of land use. So you'll see forest generates that much. Another study found 0.4. There should be a third column, but I've cut off. So in essence, the model makes a third column here, and I'm sorry it's not on. It shows it's in the middle. That this only had numbers for 3. This was a detailed study, had numbers for 6. They developed numbers, their model, for all 6 of these land uses, which then combine, these 7 categories combine a larger 21 types of land uses. Next one, please. So this is the whole chart showing all the different 40 types of land uses, breaking into pervious, impervious. This comes up with a number. This is pounds of phosphorus per year that can then get applied to the GIS, telling you how many acres of all these land uses there are in each. And this is down to 30-meter pixels, that small fineness of analysis. Next one, please. All right, so now remember that big blow-up chart? This is what you can zoom into. All of these little squares, the smallest is 30 square meters. This is the Branch River. So you'll notice these are the villages, the clusters. Unfortunately, we don't have much agriculture. Out west, a map like this would look, you'd see all the agricultural fields. But go through the next 5 or 6, and we'll just, here stop. But here is Pawtucket. Here is the river that comes up here. Here is Woonsocket. That's scattered. You can actually see the river, which shows as white, going through downtown Woonsocket. And then further quickly, up in the Clear River, very little loads from a natural to state forest. But those mill villages, there are little hot spots. They're not real hot spots, they're warm spots. Degrees of warmth for phosphorus loading. Continue. Here, this is the trouble. Kettlebrook sub-watershed. This is Kettlebrook watershed, but this is Worcester. This is that CSO area. It's a good thing their downtown goes to the treatment plant to get us. So the challenge, here's Worcester Airport. So the technology is pretty cool what you can do. Let's keep going. This is the upper Blackstone. The other side here is the Quinsigamond River. Again, the development in Worcester is a challenge. The West River, relatively clean loads, and that's the theory, that the main stem is polluted, but we've kept those major tributaries to be clean. They add fresh water, they bring the dilution up, the river does get cleaner. So you see coming out of Upton, West River, one more. Auburn's got a challenge. Here's the highways coming through. So you can go down at different levels. You can see downtown Auburn with the mall. Continue. All right, this is the pretty cool app. This is Google Earth with the phosphorus load map overlaid. So you'll notice this residential house is brighter red. It comes in shades of green here. This, I'm proud to say, is my farm lot. This is 2 acres, which I have been plowing for the last 5 years. You'll notice they distinguish between the pasture and my plow strip. So the technology, they can pick up to 30 pixels, and they'll notice, okay, there's a little bit more phosphorus load in this intensive agriculture versus pasture, versus small or large lot residential has the load. So my professor, he's created this app, of course, he's got young students working on that. Then this is the spring, summer, fall, winter, because that's how the model can predict it seasonally, the load of phosphorus in 0.1s for each of those 30-meter pixels. And then, so you can Google down at your house, and you could see, it's probably all going to be the same, but if you lived in a variety, you could say, oh, well, here's the hot spot. Here's where my phosphorus is coming from a very crude perspective. But then the opportunity for education. Okay, what do you do with it? Sorry, the quality of this is, you have BMPs, right? So you can click on that, and he'll have tools of coming down vegetative filter strips. And here's where the water comes over the grass filter strip, through the grass swale to the retention sill. And then it has a little education so that the homeowner can figure out what works best for them. There's a lot of these out there. Continue on the next. So here's a bioretention in rain gardens using plants and microbes. So all this is this app that's all interconnected. Couple more water quality, swales. Keep going. This is my last slide. This is a rain garden at Clark. You've talked about rain gardens and the ability. This is highly visible right at the corner of their admissions office. And working with the professors, sustainability, then they got the students themselves to work with the landscape architects. Even better, the maintenance guy, the head of plants. He designed it himself. He worked with students to build it. They had children there that day, so they were able to incorporate a celebration. I think it was a major boost for Clark to see, yes, we can be sustainable in downtown Worcester. And we've been fortunate enough to get some MET funding to do rain gardens throughout. Thanks to supplemental environmental projects, Thunder Mist and Woonsocket, there's going to be some good demonstration stormwater efforts going there as well. So I think that's it, right? Yeah. So that's it for phosphorus. I threw a lot at you. It's a draft study now. It's pretty much all been done. It will be online, and I'm not sure when this app will be available. My professor is going to be working on it.